thought I'd speak about a little bit today is kind of why coronavirus presents a threat to our mental health, but then also kind of try and give a few tips on how to deal with that. So when we're looking at anxiety generally from a psychological perspective, we tend to find that things that cause anxiety are things that are novel, are things that are a threat, or are things that bring up uncertainty. And of course, we know that coronavirus represents all of these things. It is novel. It's unlike any virus that any of us have experienced in our lifetime. There is certainly a threat there, and a threat, I guess, on many levels, right? So it goes without saying that this isn't just about a threat to one's mortality and one's health, but it's a threat to one's businesses, it's a threat to one's relationships, it's a threat to one's mental health. And then finally, and really importantly, it's the uncertainty angle. And I think this, more than anything, gets us psychologically. I think human beings rely very much on a sense of volition, a sense of control, a sense of certainty to feel balanced. And with any illness, one of the biggest challenges is dealing with a sense of uncertainty. And I think with coronavirus, to a great extent, because we don't know much about it, that's sort of ever present. So again, if we kind of break down anxiety, I always think about it like this. It's the feeling that something's going to happen and I don't have the resources to cope with that. So it's a differential between what I think the resources I have inside me are and what I'm anticipating happening. And if there's a disconnect with that, that's what becomes exceedingly problematic. So I think what I wanted to speak about today are some of the things that maybe we can do to try and sort of mitigate some of the effects. Now, I've worked clinically for years, and when people come to see me, one of the first things I ask is, are you getting the basics right? And by that, I mean things like eating, sleeping, and moving. Now, this sounds really simplistic, but actually, at a time when we're self-isolating, when we're at home, where all of our day-to-day routine is disrupted, having any sort of semblance of a routine is going to be key. In recent years, we've recognized the importance of nutrition on mental health in a way that we've never recognized before. And so while the temptation is going to be around eating junk or eating at different times or eating really late, it's imperative that that kind of really basic thing of eating healthy meals 3 times a day, it's something tangible to hold on to and will make a big difference. Likewise with sleep. Again, for years, I remember when I was training, it was one of the things that you would ask if someone came to see you with low mood, you'd ask how they were sleeping. The assumption being that sleeplessness was caused by depression. Now we know that insomnia or sleepless nights actually feed into depression, feed into low mood themselves. So ensuring that you're able to wake up at a similar time every day, to go to bed at a similar time, again, really important. And again, it's going to be a challenge, right? There's a lot of people now that the routine's out the window, they're mindlessly watching TV, they're mindlessly scrolling news channels, the anxiety's high. So being able to get that under control is key. And then finally, moving, exercise. I mean, there's study after study that attests to this. It's imperative to maintain good physical health for mental health. And a lot of people, again, will find this difficult because of all the changes that have been made, but you almost need to kind of diarize this the way that you would anything else into your day. The other thing that I think is really important is the language that we use. I really dislike the term social isolation. We live in a more socially connected time than literally ever before in history. There is absolutely no need to socially isolate. We need to physically isolate. But in terms of connection, I think right now it's more important forever. And I mean this on both a personal and a professional level. So in terms of what's going on in our day-to-day with our friends and our family, being able to connect online. There's huge amounts of technology. My mom lives in Cyprus. She was teaching me how to cook Greek pasticcio the other day on my little video in my kitchen when she was over there. So, it's not just about stopping and talking. It's about how do we do this creatively. My daughter showed me that you can watch Netflix with friends and you can pause at the same point and comment on it. We have amazing tech now. We've got House Party where a bunch of people can speak at the same time. And these things used to be little fun add-ons. I think at a time when we're having to kind of physically isolate, it's really important we use that kind of tech effectively to be able to do that. I think the other thing in terms of kind of connecting as well is to ensure that that we don't kind of get into that rhythm of our world becoming smaller and smaller. Again, one of the big things that anxiety does is it makes your world smaller, right? So, you begin to feel anxious about something, so you avoid it. And of course, the more you avoid, the more anxious you feel. So it may very well, be now that, we're told not to do one thing, we're told not to do another. So our worlds become tighter, they become smaller. Being able to push back on this is going to be imperative. The third thing I wanted to speak about is this idea of control. It's as something that everyone's touching on. We feel out of control. We're told every day that the worst case scenario is happening. And interestingly enough, we're living at a time where we couldn't possibly consume all the news out there. We have more news than any human being could ever kind of take the time to assimilate, either emotionally or cognitively. So we're in this really difficult situation where it's constantly coming at us. And it's bad news, and we don't feel we can do anything. And I think with this, one of the things that's, that we can do is separate the stuff that we can control from the stuff that we can't. And there's a couple of ways of doing this. I think it's really important to think about how we curate our consciousness, right? You could literally read horror stories 24/7. And while, of course, you want to have a realistic view of what's going on and getting your news, I think there's something really important about having some barriers to, having some limitations on how much you consume, when you consume, and how you consume. So it may be that we, have a decision as a family to ensure that you sit down and you consume most of your, you read the news in the day, you sit down and you watch the news at 6 o'clock, or you check your phone for news maybe on 3 occasions, but there needs to be a limit. And interspersed within that, it's vital that your consciousness is allowed to kind of drift elsewhere, right? That you're reading a good news story, that you're reading a novel, that you're speaking to someone who is not just going to heighten your anxiety. Because the fact of the matter is, I think now more than ever, we need to be conscious of kind of keeping that sort of emotional 5 a day. Sort of in the UK, we had this big thing of eating 5 vegetables and fruits a day. I think psychologically, you need an emotional 5 a day. And what does that mean? That means something that gives you a sense of purpose, something that gives you a sense of connection, something that relaxes you, something that allows you to escape, and something positive, right? So there's something very key about ensuring how we not only seek out information, but how we speak about it with others, and how we allow ourselves to think about it. And I think, again, this is going to be important for a lot of sort of business people out there as well, who are trying to keep their businesses going. And this is kind of one of those stories that is going to get in the way everywhere. So speaking about boundaries, right? When you are kind of, with everything to do with work, with what your expectations are from your employees, to if you are an employee, what you want your employers to know in terms of what those anxieties are, having space to speak about them, but then also sort of coronavirus-free spaces where you can speak about other things that allow you to kind of escape, to move on. And I think finally, I think what's really important to sort of look at is this idea of, in many ways, this is, someone was saying the other day, are you sick of listening to Brexit more or this more? I think Brexit was divisive, but I think, I kind of prefer listening to Corona stuff because at least it connects us, right? Potentially, this is one of those things that's going to bring us together, because by protecting, ourselves, we are protecting each other. And I think we just need to be on top of the language that we use. We can use the language of loss, right? We can use the language of losing freedoms and, having to stay inside, or we can lose the language of positivity around what we are doing to give back and how this will feel when we come out of it. So I think it's really important to try very hard to be aware of how we speak to ourselves. I always say to the people that I work with that, no one speaks to you as much as you speak to yourself. So kind of being aware of that sort of critical voice, that fearful voice in your head, and being able to push back on it is going to be key. So those are my main points. I thought I'd kind of open up the space now to some Q&A, because I often find that those are kind of where a lot of the interesting things come up. So I'll hand over to you.
Thank you so much indeed, Linda. Really, really appreciate it. Fascinating stuff. So thank you so much, everyone, for the questions. so we've had a couple of people asking, how do you cope with the thoughts that this is going to go on for an indefinite amount of time?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think what you need to look at is, what do I know that's certain? What do I know that's uncertain? So here, we know that this will at some point end. We don't know when, but we do know that it will. So I think kind of having the background that I need to prepare for when this ends, what I will do. But also I need to be in the here and now. There's something really important about being in the present. So what can I manage today? Today I need to manage a few things so I can keep myself safe with all the hand washing, the social distancing, but also there's something about the here and now, about what I can control in terms of how I'm living my life, right? What did I do today to give me a sense of purpose? What did I do today to give me a sense of connection? And those two little things that you can control will actually stand you in much better stead in terms of the overall sense of uncertainty, but also when things do come to an end, and they will, you're probably going to be in a much better place to kind of face that as well.
I've had a few people just asking for you to go through the 5 a day again, please.
Okay, so I think we need to do something every day that gives us a sense of purpose, right? So, and sometimes it's big, sometimes it's small. Sometimes it's like, I'm going to cook a healthy meal for my kids today, or I'm going to call an elderly neighbor and make sure they're okay. Secondly, a sense of connection. So being able to feel like I've had a meaningful connection. I think, again, it's a paradox of such a connected age that so many of us feel disconnected. So ensuring that there is a meaningful connection. And sometimes it's sending a cat meme, but sometimes it's a deeper discussion. So ensuring that you do that. Thirdly, to ensure that you've engaged in some self-care skills. Have I looked at something that gives me a sense of, I've done this for me. So whether it's, I've taken time to work out, I've taken time to speak to a friend about a worry. I think it's really important with our emotional 5 a day to kind of check in with ourselves. So what are we doing? How are we kind of self-reflecting around that? Have I checked in today? Have I kind of taken my temperature? And again, that can take the form of just standing still, looking at what's causing anxiety, what's not. And I think finally, and really importantly, it's kind of that emotional 5 a day of being in the present, sort of stopping. And whether you do that through mindfulness or whether you do that through reading your favorite book, but that idea of kind of these 10 minutes are mine and mine alone.
So I've had a strand of questions also around anxiety. Some people have asked on behalf of how they deal with their employees who are potentially suffering from anxiety over coronavirus, and it's becoming all-consuming. And some other people have talked about it for themselves, how they should better deal with the stress and the anxiety which coronavirus is generating.
So here's the interesting thing with anxiety. It's the difference between reacting to possibility and probability. Is it possible that you're going to get corona and be terribly sick and possibly die of it? It's possible. Is it probable? Actually, it's very improbable unless you are in that, and even for those people in that very small bracket, right? So over sort of a very, very high age, most people tend to be quite high, in fact, over 80, a lot of them with underlying health conditions. And again, in that bracket themselves, and again, I was reading a really interesting article from an epidemiologist, we're not actually sure if they're dying just of corona or of corona and everything else, right? So actually, again, and our brains aren't great at kind of, working through possibility and probability when we're anxious, right? But that's precisely what underlies anxiety. It's the fact that we overestimate the threat. So I feel like I'm going to die of corona doesn't mean I will die of corona. Now, there's a couple of things that you can do. I think number one is to kind of almost pedantically say that to yourself. Like, what are the odds in my age group? What's happening? What are the odds? So I may get it, but in terms of dying, it's very unlikely. Secondly, what can I do to protect myself? Well, there is a lot we can do. We know that it will make a huge difference. And we've seen this. We've seen it in South Korea, we've seen it in Japan, we've seen it in Taiwan. If we socially distance, if we keep to the hand cleaning, if we make sure we stay away from each other for a little while, we know we're going to contain this, right? So focus on the things that you can do and ensure that when those thoughts come in, you kind of give yourself that mantra of possibility, possibility, but then move your thoughts on. I think those are the two cognitive tools when you're dealing with anxiety. Number one is challenging the thought, and number two is pushing back and then distracting, right? So I'm going to challenge the thought, and if you have to write it down, I think that's often a wonderful tool. Here are the reasons why this is an exaggerated thought. And now I'm going to watch, my favorite episode of Friends, or now I'm going to go and work on that spreadsheet, or now I'm going to go throw a ball around with my kids. So I'm going to look at the thought, I'm going to acknowledge it, I'm going to push back on it, and then I'm going to shift.
Last question. Thank you so much indeed. And I think we focused on the individuals, and the questions come up which says, as an organization, we're trying to engage our employees by sharing information on staying active, focus on the present, avenues to learn, informal contact, informal connects. What else can we be looking at as employers to keep our employees engaged and productive and treat them right, I suppose, right now?
Yeah, I think there's a sense that they need to feel like they're cared about, right? I think in times like this, I think we're going to remember the people that showed up and the people that didn't. And that's true of organizations as well, right? So how are you showing up? So, I think absolutely it's wonderful that you're giving that information, that you're giving advice. I would also say use technology just to connect, the way that you might have a team building thing down, down at the pub or having a drink together. It may be like, hey guys, we're going to be online on a house party for 45 minutes on Friday if you want to join in, just so we can all see how we're doing. Because what you want to do is you want to establish a new normal, right? Our normal has been disrupted. Again, human beings need routine. Human beings need ritual. We're really good at that. And the more we get it in place, the sooner it is. So we've spoken about the importance of routine and ritual with waking up at a certain time and eating at a certain time and all of those things. But you can do it in the workplace as well. So if you help them feel valued in terms of that social aspect that may be missing, which is what people I think in many ways are going to miss most from the workplaces, the better.
Dr. Linda, thank you so much indeed for your time. It's been a privilege to listen to you, and I'm sure our attendees, by the amount of questions, have thoroughly enjoyed it.
Thanks, guys. Lovely to speak. Thanks for having me.
Thanks so much.